In a grand mansion in the heart of Lagos, a young woman named Aisha stood nervously in front of a large mirror, adjusting the black dress she wore for the evening. She was beautiful, with a warm smile and an elegance that captured anyone's attention. Her dark eyes sparkled with hope and dreams for the future. Aisha was no ordinary woman. She was the fiancé of Lawal, a billionaire who had swept her off her feet a year ago. But behind the perfect relationship, there was a hidden challenge. Lawal wasn't just a businessman. He was a man with secrets. He was powerful, successful, and respected. Yet, he wanted something more. He wanted to test Aisha's love for him in a way that no one would expect. Lawal had a plan, a dangerous plan. He was tired of all the fake relationships around him, people who only loved him for his wealth. He knew his fiancée loved him, but did she truly love him for who he was, or was she after his fortune? To answer this question, Lawal had decided to put her love to the ultimate test. The test was simple yet cruel. Lawal would pretend to be paralyzed and helpless, completely dependent on Aisha. He would play the role of a man who could do nothing for himself. He wanted to see how long Aisha would stay, whether her love was truly unconditional. The plan was set into motion. Lawal's trusted butler, Tiga, who had been in his service for years, was instructed to carry out the act. With the help of Mercy, the maid, they would pretend that Lawal had been in a terrible accident, leaving him unable to walk or even move. Aisha would have no idea, and Lawal would watch from a distance, observing her every move. The day came when Lawal fell from a great height in a staged accident. He was brought into the house, pale and weak, lying motionless on a wheelchair. His body was limp, and his once strong arms and legs lay still, as if life had completely drained from him. Aisha entered the room to see the shocking sight of her fiancé in this state. Her heart stopped for a moment. "Oh my God! What happened?" Aisha cried, rushing to his side. "Lawal, what did they do to you? Please, speak to me." Her voice trembled with worry, but Lawal didn't respond. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was shallow. He remained silent, as the house echoed with Aisha's frantic calls for help. Days passed, and Lawal stayed in his position, unable to move. Aisha, who had once lived a life of luxury, was now forced to care for him in every way possible. She fed him, bathed him, and sat with him through the long, lonely nights. Every time she looked at his unresponsive body, she wondered if this was really what he had become. It hurt her deeply to see him like this, but deep down Aisha was determined. She would not give up on him. She couldn't. But there was one person in the house who was watching this situation very carefully. Mercy, the maid, who had been working for Lawal's family for years, had been silently observing the way Aisha cared for her fiancé. Unlike everyone else, Mercy was not fooled by Lawal's scheme. She knew the truth. She knew that this was all just an elaborate test, but she also understood the deep love Aisha had for Lawal. Mercy saw how Aisha never once complained about the exhausting work she had to do. She watched as Aisha would spend hours by his side, talking to him about her day, singing songs to him, hoping that her voice would bring him back to life. Mercy could see the pain in Aisha's eyes. She could see how hard Aisha was trying, even though Lawal wasn't aware of her efforts. Mercy was touched by Aisha's kindness, and a thought began to form in her mind. Aisha was passing the test without even knowing it. It was Mercy who began to question the fairness of this game. Was it right for Lawal to play with Aisha's heart like this? And, more importantly, was Aisha truly the woman Lawal had been waiting for? Mercy didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. Aisha was everything Lawal needed, even if he didn't see it yet. Days turned into weeks, and Aisha's devotion never wavered. However, something in the house had begun to change. The tension between Lawal and Aisha was growing, and Mercy could sense that something was about to happen. She had seen Aisha cry more than once, and each time she saw the tears, her heart ached for her. But she couldn't bring herself to tell Aisha the truth. After all, it wasn't her place. One evening, as Aisha was sitting beside Lawal's wheelchair, stroking his hand, something unexpected happened. Aisha stood up and turned to Tiga, who had been silently observing the scene. "Please, Tiga," Aisha said, her voice cracking. "Tell me, is there any hope? Will he ever wake up? I can't do this anymore. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending that everything is okay." Tiga remained silent for a moment, his gaze avoiding hers. He was struggling with the guilt of keeping the truth from Aisha. He knew she had to know the truth eventually, but he also feared what would happen if she found out too soon. But before he could answer, the silence in the room was broken by a loud noise from upstairs. A crash. A loud, shattering noise. The house seemed to shake. Aisha's heart raced, and she quickly ran toward the source of the sound. Tiga followed closely behind her. When they reached the upstairs bedroom, they were met with a sight that left them both speechless. Lawal was standing in the middle of the room, fully awake, his face filled with a smirk. He was walking on his own. "Aisha, I need to talk to you," Lawal said, his voice cold and emotionless. Aisha's legs gave way beneath her. She collapsed to the floor in shock, her eyes wide with disbelief. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her heart raced as she realized what had just happened. Lawal had been pretending. All this time he had been pretending. But why? Why would he do this to her? "Lawal? No," Aisha whispered, shaking her head as tears filled her eyes. Why did you do this to me?" But before Lawal could answer, Mercy, who had followed them upstairs, stepped forward and said, "Aisha, he's been testing you. But the real question is, what will you do now?" Aisha stood frozen, looking between Mercy and Lawal, her heart torn in two. How could she ever trust him again? What would happen now? The next morning, the sun shone brightly through the large windows of Lawal's mansion. But despite the beauty outside, inside the house, there was an eerie tension. The air felt thick with the weight of the revelation, and Aisha couldn't shake the shock of what had happened the night before. She had barely slept. After the shocking revelation that Lawal had been faking his paralysis, Aisha spent the entire night pacing, trying to make sense of everything. How could the man she loved do this to her? She had spent weeks caring for him, worrying about him, all for nothing. And yet, despite her hurt, despite the betrayal, there was a small part of her that still couldn't let go. She still loved him, and that love, however broken it now seemed, was still there. Aisha sat on the edge of the bed, her hands resting on her knees. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft knock at the door. It was Mercy. "Good morning, Aisha," Mercy said softly as she entered the room. "I know you're hurting, but please hear me out." Aisha looked up at Mercy with eyes that were filled with both anger and confusion. "I don't know if I can do this anymore, Mercy," she replied, her voice cracking. "He lied to me. He played with my heart. And now, I don't even know who he is anymore." Mercy stepped closer, her eyes filled with empathy. "I understand, Aisha. I really do. But sometimes, people don't know what they have until it's almost too late." Lawal's actions, while unforgivable, came from a place of fear. He wanted to see if you loved him for who he truly was, not his money. But he never expected for you to love him the way you did. Aisha shook her head. "How can I ever trust him again, Mercy? He could have talked to me about this, but instead, he chose to deceive me. I don't know if I can forgive him." "I can't tell you what to do, Aisha," Mercy said gently. "But I do know that sometimes love is about understanding, even when it hurts. And if you love him, if you believe in him, you have to decide what's more important, the past or the future." Aisha didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced with the words Mercy had spoken, but nothing seemed to make sense. Lawal's actions had shaken her to her core, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find a way to justify his behavior. Just then, there was another knock at the door, but this time, it wasn't Mercy. It was Lawal. Aisha stood up from the bed, her heart pounding as she turned to face him. His presence alone was enough to make her feel a mix of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion. But there was something else too, a deep longing. "Aisha," Lawal said, his voice soft but firm. "Please, let me explain." Aisha didn't know whether to shout at him or run away. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had never imagined that the man she had chosen to spend her life with could betray her in such a painful way. And yet, despite all that had happened, there he was, standing in front of her, waiting for her to give him a chance to explain. "I don't know if I can listen to you right now," Aisha said, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Lawal. You lied to me. You faked everything. Everything." Lawal took a step closer, his eyes filled with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, Aisha. I thought I could trust you enough to see the real me. But I didn't realize how much I was risking. Please just hear me out. I need you to understand that what I did wasn't about you. It was about me, about my fear of being loved for the wrong reasons." Aisha closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. She didn't know what to say. The hurt in her heart was too deep. She wanted to walk away, to tell him that it was over, but something inside her told her to wait. "Please," Lawal continued, his voice breaking. "I've realized now that I was wrong. I've seen how much you truly care about me, how much you've been through for me. I never wanted to make you feel this way, Aisha. I love you. I need you to understand that." Aisha took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. Her mind was still processing everything that had happened, but a small part of her, the part that had loved him all this time, couldn't ignore the sincerity in his voice. "Lawal," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need time. I need space to think about this." Lawal nodded, his face filled with pain. "I understand. I'll give you all the time you need. But please know that I am truly sorry. I was afraid of losing you, and I acted out of that fear. I never wanted to hurt you. Please, just don't give up on us." With that, Lawal turned and walked out of the room, leaving Aisha standing alone, her heart torn in two. As she sat back down on the bed, Mercy quietly entered again, standing by the door. "You did the right thing, Aisha," Mercy said, her voice soothing. "You're strong. You'll figure this out. Just remember that forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey." Aisha nodded, wiping away a tear. "I just don't know if I'm ready to forgive him yet, but I'll figure it out. I have to." The day dragged on in a blur of emotions. Aisha spent most of it in her room, thinking, reflecting, wondering if there was still hope for her and Lawal. But in the back of her mind, one question lingered. Could she ever truly forgive him? Just as the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the windows, Aisha heard a knock at her door. It was Tiga, the butler, carrying a letter in his hand. "Aisha, Lawal has asked me to give you this," Tiga said, handing her the letter. "He wanted to make sure you have everything you need. Please, take your time." Aisha looked at the letter, unsure of what to do. She hadn't expected a letter from Lawal. What could it possibly say? Hesitantly, she opened it and began to read. "Aisha, I am not perfect. I have made mistakes, and I know I have hurt you, but I want to make it right. Please allow me the chance to prove to you that my love for you is real. I will do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. Please give me that chance. I love you, and I always will." The words on the page were simple, yet they stirred something deep inside her. Could she give him a chance? Was she ready to move past the pain and rebuild the trust they once had? As Aisha sat there, lost in thought, Mercy's words echoed in her mind. Forgiveness is a journey, but Aisha didn't know if she was ready to take that first step. The following days were a blur for Aisha. She spent them in quiet reflection, her mind constantly drifting between the possibility of a future with Lawal and the sting of betrayal that still gnawed at her heart. She couldn't ignore the hurt. It was too raw, too fresh. But the letter, the sincerity in his words, lingered in her thoughts, making it hard to fully let go. Her world had been turned upside down. Lawal, the man she had planned a future with, had pretended to be someone he wasn't. The man who had swept her off her feet, the man who had promised to always care for her, had been testing her love all along. She felt like a fool. Yet, there was a part of her, small, yet persistent, that couldn't dismiss the love they once shared. As the days passed, Mercy watched Aisha closely, noticing how torn her friend was. She could see Aisha trying to move past the pain, but the trust she once had was shattered. And though Mercy had been there for Aisha through the worst of it, she couldn't offer any easy answers. She knew that only Aisha could decide whether to move forward with Lawal or walk away for good. One evening, after a long, emotional day, Lawal knocked at Aisha's door again. This time, Aisha was prepared. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let her emotions control her. She had to face this head-on, no matter how painful it was. When she opened the door, Lawal stood there, looking worn and tired, his usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. His eyes, once filled with ambition and pride, now seemed vulnerable, almost pleading. "Aisha," he began, his voice low and earnest. "I know I've hurt you more than I ever should have, but I need you to understand something. What I did, the test, it was wrong. I see that now. I can't take it back, but I am asking for a chance to make things right. Please, give me the chance to prove that my love for you is real." Aisha stood still, her arms crossed, her emotions swirling. "How can I trust you, Lawal? You faked your paralysis. You put me through hell all because of some test. I don't know how to get past that. I don't know if I can trust you again." "I understand," Lawal replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "But I love you, Aisha. I don't want to live my life wondering if you're here because of who I am or what I have. That was my mistake. And now all I want is to prove that I love you, not just the idea of you. I'll do whatever it takes." Aisha looked at him, her heart torn. She could see the pain in his eyes, but that didn't erase the pain he had caused her. She had spent weeks caring for him, never once questioning the depths of her love for him. Yet he had tested her, and now she was left questioning everything. "I need time, Lawal," Aisha said quietly. "I need time to think. I can't just forget everything that's happened. This isn't something that can be fixed with a few words." "I know," he said softly, stepping back. "I won't push you, but please know that I'm here waiting, whenever you're ready." Aisha watched as he turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the hallway. The door clicked softly behind him, and she was left alone, standing in the middle of her room, feeling the weight of the decision she had yet to make. For the next few days, Aisha kept to herself, trying to process everything. She spent hours walking around the mansion, trying to find some clarity. Could she forgive him? Could she forget what he had done? She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. Her heart was still with him, despite the betrayal. One evening, Aisha sat alone in the garden, staring up at the stars. The cool night air caressed her skin, but it did little to soothe the turmoil within her. It was then that Mercy found her. "I've been watching you, Aisha," Mercy said as she sat beside her. "You're carrying a heavy burden, and I can see it's tearing you apart. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to make this decision right away. Just take it one day at a time." Aisha glanced at Mercy, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can forgive him, Mercy. He lied to me. He hurt me." Mercy nodded. "I know, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means giving yourself the chance to heal. And sometimes the person who hurt you is the one who needs to show that they've changed. Lawal may have hurt you, but you have to decide if he's worth the risk of opening your heart again." Aisha sat in silence, her mind racing. Could she take the risk? Could she give Lawal another chance? She didn't have the answers, but she knew that she needed to confront him one last time. Later that evening, Aisha found herself standing at Lawal's door. Her heart pounded in her chest as she raised her hand to knock. She didn't know what she was going to say, but she knew she needed to hear him out one last time. The door opened, and there stood Lawal, looking surprised to see her. His expression softened as he stepped aside to let her in. "I've been thinking, Lawal," Aisha said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "And I've come to a decision." Lawal held his breath, his eyes searching hers. "What decision?" Aisha took a deep breath. "I can't just forget what you did. I can't pretend it didn't happen. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give us another chance. If you prove to me that this isn't just about you anymore. It has to be about both of us. Our love, our trust. Tears welled in Lawal's eyes as he reached for her hands. Thank you. I swear to you, I will prove my love for you every day, for the rest of my life. Aisha looked at him, her heart heavy but hopeful. Maybe it wasn't about erasing the past. Maybe it was about moving forward together. But only time would tell if that was possible. Just as they stood there, holding each other, a sudden crash echoed from the hallway, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. Aisha's heart skipped a beat as she looked toward the door, her hand gripping Lawal's. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice filled with concern. Before Lawal could respond, the door burst open, and Tiga entered, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "Master Aisha, you need to come quickly," Tiga gasped, his voice shaking. "Something's happened." Aisha's heart raced as she looked at Lawal, her breath catching in her throat. What had happened now? Aisha and Lawal rushed after Tiga, their footsteps quickening as they followed him down the hallway. The air was thick with tension, and Aisha's mind raced. What had happened? Why did Tiga look so frightened? They reached the staircase, and Tiga stopped abruptly, turning toward them. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "It's Mercy," he gasped. "She's gone." Aisha's heart sank. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What do you mean she's gone?" Aisha asked, her voice trembling with panic. "Where is she?" Tiga swallowed hard, his expression filled with dread. She disappeared. One minute she was in the kitchen, and the next, she was just gone. "I searched everywhere, but there's no sign of her. It's like she vanished." Lawal stepped forward, his jaw clenched in frustration. "This doesn't make sense. Mercy would never just leave without saying anything. Something's wrong. We need to find her." Aisha nodded, her hands shaking as she grabbed Lawal's arm. "We have to find her. Mercy has always been there for me. She can't just disappear like this." The three of them quickly moved through the mansion, calling out for Mercy, but there was no response. Every room they searched seemed empty, and the house felt eerily quiet. It was as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. After what felt like hours of searching, they finally reached the back garden. There, just beyond the pool, Aisha spotted something, Mercy's scarf. Her heart stopped. "Oh my God," Aisha whispered, her voice barely audible. Lawal's eyes narrowed as he bent down to pick it up. "This is Mercy's scarf," he said grimly. "She's been here." Aisha took a step forward, her gaze scanning the area. She could see that the garden, usually so peaceful and well-kept, was now disturbed. The bushes were rustling, and the ground was scuffed, as if someone had been dragged across it. Tiga stepped forward cautiously, his face filled with concern. What if something happened to her? What if she's in danger? Aisha's heart raced, but she knew one thing for sure: Mercy needed them, and they were the only ones who could find her. With renewed determination, Aisha, Lawal, and Tiga ventured further into the garden, following the signs of struggle. They made their way past the bushes, overgrown with vines, and to a small, secluded corner at the back of the property. There, hidden behind a large tree, they discovered something that froze them in their tracks. Mercy's phone was lying on the ground, cracked and discarded. Aisha knelt down, trembling as she picked it up. "Mercy," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Where are you?" Just then, Lawal's voice cut through the silence. "Aisha, look!" Aisha turned quickly, following Lawal's gaze to see something that made her blood run cold. There, lying on the ground near a small rock garden, was a note. Tiga stepped forward, his face a mask of concern as he bent down to pick it up. He unfolded it slowly and read aloud. "You think you've won, but this is only the beginning. Mercy was just the first. You will never escape me. This game is far from over." Aisha's hands went cold as she heard the words. Her mind spun. Who would do this? Why would anyone target Mercy? What game was being played here? Lawal's voice was steady, but there was a clear edge of anger in it. Whoever did this is playing a dangerous game, and I'm not going to let them get away with it. Aisha's heart ached as she thought about the love and loyalty Mercy had shown her. Mercy had always been there for her, especially during the darkest times. And now someone had taken her, leaving only this cryptic note behind. "We need to find her," Aisha said, her voice firm with resolve. "We can't let this go on any longer." Lawal nodded, his jaw tight with determination. "I will use every resource at my disposal to find out who's behind this and get Mercy back. No one hurts the people I care about." Aisha took a deep breath, the weight of the situation settling heavily on her shoulders. She had never imagined her life would take such a dark turn. First, it had been Lawal's betrayal, and now this. But she couldn't give up. Not now. She had to stay strong, for Mercy, for herself, and for Lawal. Just as they were about to head back inside, a sudden noise echoed from the other side of the garden. The sound of footsteps, approaching quickly. Aisha's heart skipped a beat as she turned, her eyes scanning the area. Who was there? Was it someone who had taken Mercy? Or was it someone else entirely? The footsteps grew louder, and within moments, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. Aisha's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped into the dim light. It was Ken, one of Lawal's former business associates, who had mysteriously disappeared a few months ago. "Ken?" Lawal called, his voice filled with both surprise and suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Ken smirked as he approached them, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling confidence. "Oh, don't worry, Lawal. I'm not here to cause trouble. At least, not the kind you think. I have something you might want to hear." Aisha felt a chill run down her spine. Something wasn't right. Ken's sudden appearance, the cryptic note, and the disappearance of Mercy. It all seemed too connected to be a coincidence. "What do you know about Mercy?" Aisha demanded, her voice shaking with anger. Ken raised an eyebrow, the smirk never leaving his face. "You'll find out soon enough. But trust me, you're not ready for the truth." Before Aisha could respond, Ken turned and began to walk away, disappearing into the shadows. Aisha was left standing there, her mind racing with questions, doubts, and fear. Who was Ken working for? What was he hiding? Lawal stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't know what game he's playing, but I won't let him hurt you, Aisha. We will find Mercy, and we will uncover the truth." As they stood there, the weight of the mystery pressing down on them, Aisha knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and growing dread. Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The disappearance of Mercy, the cryptic note, and the sudden reappearance of Ken. It all felt like a sinister puzzle that she couldn't piece together. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. Lawal had pulled all his resources to help find Mercy. He had called in his private security team, tracked down any leads he could find, and even reached out to his closest business associates for help. But despite all the effort, there were no clues, no signs of where Mercy had gone. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. As the days turned into a week, Aisha grew restless. She couldn't sit by and do nothing. Mercy had always been there for her. She couldn't just sit in the mansion, waiting for someone else to find her friend. She needed to take matters into her own hands. One evening, after a long day of searching, Aisha found herself sitting alone in the garden again, the same spot where she had discovered Mercy's scarf. She had asked Lawal for some space to think. He had understood, though his concern for her was evident in every word he spoke. But as Aisha sat there, her mind was far from peaceful. She couldn't escape the haunting feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She needed answers. She needed to know who was behind this, and most importantly, she needed to find Mercy. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. She looked up to see Tiga, the butler, approaching her with a look of urgency in his eyes. "Aisha," he said quietly, "I need to speak with you. It's about Ken." Aisha's heart skipped a beat. Ken again. What more could he possibly have to say? Ken? Aisha asked, standing up and walking towards him. What about him? Tiga looked around cautiously, making sure no one else was listening. I've been keeping an eye on him as per Lawal's instructions, and I've uncovered something strange. Aisha's curiosity piqued. What do you mean? Tiga hesitated before continuing, his voice barely above a whisper. Ken has been in contact with someone outside of the country. I don't know who it is, but the phone calls he's been making aren't just casual. They seem urgent. And I've also found out that he's been in touch with a man named Micheal. Aisha frowned. She had never heard of Micheal before. Who's Micheal? Tiga's expression darkened. I don't know much about him, but I've heard rumors. He's connected to some very dangerous people. I believe he's the one pulling the strings. Aisha's blood ran cold. She didn't know what to make of this new information. Ken had always been a bit of an enigma, but now he seemed even more dangerous than she had imagined. Tiga, we need to find out more about Micheal, Aisha said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. I don't care what it takes. We need to know who he is and why he's involved in all of this. Tiga nodded. I'll do my best, Aisha, but we have to be careful. This is bigger than we thought. As Tiga walked away, Aisha stood there, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Mercy was still out there, somewhere, and every second that passed brought her closer to the truth. But the truth, Aisha feared, would be far darker than she ever imagined. The next day, Aisha and Lawal sat in his study, going over the latest developments. Lawal had finally gotten word from his security team. They had traced the phone number Ken had been calling, but the lead had gone cold. No one knew where the calls were coming from, and the people involved were careful to cover their tracks. We're running out of time, Aisha, Lawal said, frustration evident in his voice. I can't just sit here and wait. We need to do something. Aisha nodded. I know. I feel the same way. I'm done waiting. I'm going to find Mercy, even if it means going after Ken myself. Lawal looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. Aisha, you can't do this alone. It's too dangerous. You don't know who you're dealing with. I don't care, Lawal, Aisha replied, her voice firm. Mercy has been there for me. Now it's my turn to be there for her. If anyone can get answers, it's me. I know Ken. I know how to get under his skin. Lawal sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't like this, but if you're determined, I'll support you. I just want you to be careful. Aisha smiled at him, though her heart was heavy with the burden of what she was about to do. I'll be careful, I promise, but I need your help. We need to find out where Ken's hiding and what he's planning. You have the resources. We'll use them. Lawal nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll pull some strings, but you need to be prepared. The people behind all of this are dangerous. We don't know what they're capable of. Aisha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. She had no choice. Mercy was out there and she needed to be found, no matter the cost. Later that evening, Aisha received a call from Tiga. He had gathered more information about Ken's whereabouts. The location was a rundown building on the outskirts of Lagos. Aisha's heart raced as she listened to the details. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She quickly got dressed, her mind set on the task ahead. She couldn't wait any longer. She had to act now. As she made her way to the door, Lawal stopped her. Aisha, please be careful. I don't want to lose you. Aisha gave him a reassuring smile, though she could see the worry in his eyes. I'll be fine. I'll come back. I promise. With that, Aisha walked out the door, determined to get answers. She was heading into the unknown, but nothing could stop her now. Mercy needed her, and no matter what, she would find her. As she drove through the dark streets of Lagos, Aisha couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every turn, every shadow, felt like it was closing in on her. And just as she reached the building that Tiga had described, she noticed something. Someone was watching her from the corner of her eye. Aisha's pulse quickened. She wasn't alone. Aisha's heart pounded in her chest as she pulled up in front of the dilapidated building on the outskirts of Lagos. The place looked abandoned. Its walls cracked, the windows boarded up, and the air around it thick with the scent of decay. Yet, something about it felt unsettlingly alive, as though it was hiding secrets within its crumbling walls. She parked the car a short distance away, stepping out into the cool night air. The streets around her were eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of the city. Tiga had provided her with the coordinates to the building, and she had no time to waste. Mercy was somewhere in that building, and Aisha was determined to find her, no matter the cost. Aisha's steps echoed as she made her way toward the entrance. She was alone, her phone in her pocket with Lawal's number saved in case things went wrong. But she had no intention of backing out now. She had come this far, and Mercy needed her. As she reached the door, Aisha hesitated for a moment, her hand resting on the rusty doorknob. The building felt unnervingly silent. It was as if time had stopped. She couldn't hear a single sound coming from inside, but she knew that whoever had taken Mercy was close. The note that had been left behind, the strange involvement of Ken, and the unknown man Micheal, it all led to this moment. Without wasting another second, Aisha pushed the door open, the rusty hinges creaking in protest. She stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the room smelled musty. She squinted, barely making out the shapes of old furniture and scattered debris. Slowly, cautiously, Aisha began to move deeper into the building, her senses on high alert. Every step she took seemed to echo in the empty silence, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching her. She moved through a long corridor, the walls lined with peeling wallpaper, and the floor creaking beneath her feet. There was no sign of life, no sound of footsteps, no voices, just silence. But Aisha knew better than to trust it. There had to be someone here, and if they were trying to hide, it was only a matter of time before she found them. The further she walked, the more oppressive the silence became. Aisha could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every creak of the floor seemed louder than before. She was close now, she could feel it. The truth was just around the corner. As she turned a corner, she saw a faint light coming from a room at the end of the hallway. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't sure what she was about to find, but there was no turning back now. With a deep breath, she moved towards the door, each step heavy with anticipation. Aisha reached for the doorknob and pushed it open. The sight before her froze her in place. Mercy was lying unconscious on the floor, her body bound by thick ropes. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn, and her hair was disheveled. But what struck Aisha the most was the look of relief in Mercy's eyes when she saw Aisha standing in the doorway. "Aisha?" Mercy whispered, her voice weak but full of hope. Aisha rushed forward, her heart racing. "Mercy! Oh my God! What have they done to you?" Mercy weakly lifted a hand, reaching out to her. "I'm fine. It's not too bad. But you need to get out of here. They're watching." Aisha's hands shook as she quickly untied the ropes binding Mercy. "Who did this to you, Mercy? Who took you?" Mercy winced in pain as Aisha helped her sit up. "It's Ken. He's been working with someone else. A man named Micheal. They have a plan. They want something from Lawal. Something big." Aisha's heart sank as she helped Mercy to her feet. "What do they want?" Mercy shook her head, her eyes filled with fear. "I don't know everything, Aisha, but I overheard them talking. They said they needed Lawal to do something, to sign something. I don't know what it is, but they won't stop until they get it. And I think it has to do with his business, his empire." Aisha's mind raced. Ken and Micheal were involved in something far bigger than she had imagined. It wasn't just about revenge or betrayal, it was about something that could destroy everything Lawal had built. Just as Aisha helped Mercy stand, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway behind them. Aisha's heart jumped into her throat. "We have to go now," Aisha whispered, urging Mercy to move. But it was too late. The door at the end of the corridor slammed open, and Ken stepped into the room, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Behind him stood two men, both dressed in black, with dark sunglasses hiding their eyes. "Well, well, well," Ken said, his voice smooth and menacing. "It looks like the cat finally found the mouse. You really thought you could just waltz in here and take her, didn't you, Aisha?" Aisha's mind raced. She needed a plan, fast. She couldn't let them take Mercy again. "Ken?" she said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering in her chest. "What do you want? What is all of this for?" Ken smirked. "It's simple, really. Lawal has something I want, and if he doesn't hand it over willingly, I'll make sure everything he cares about disappears. Starting with you, Aisha." Aisha's eyes widened. "You're crazy. Lawal won't give you anything. He'll fight you." Ken's smile faltered, just for a second. "Oh, he'll give me what I want. He doesn't have a choice." Suddenly, one of the men behind Ken lunged forward, grabbing Mercy by the arm. "Get back!" Aisha shouted, stepping in front of Mercy instinctively. But Ken's men were too strong. They shoved her aside and dragged Mercy back into the room. Aisha stumbled, her body slamming into the wall. She could hear Mercy's muffled cries, and her heart broke. She couldn't let this happen. She couldn't let them win. Desperation flooded Aisha's veins. She reached for her phone, but before she could dial for help, a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Lawal. "I don't think you understand, Ken." Lawal's voice rang out. "You've made a huge mistake." Ken turned, surprise flashing in his eyes. "Lawal, you finally decided to join the party. A little late, don't you think?" But Lawal's face was cold, his eyes burning with fury. "Let her go, Ken. Now." Aisha's heart surged with hope. Lawal had come for her. He had come for Mercy. Ken hesitated for just a moment before his grin returned. "Fine, but this isn't over. You'll give me what I want, Lawal. Or else." Before Ken could finish, Lawal lunged forward, grabbing the nearest man by the throat and throwing him into the wall. The other man tried to pull a gun from his belt, but Aisha was faster. She rushed forward, knocking the gun out of his hand. Chaos erupted, but through the turmoil, one thing became clear: Mercy was safe. The room was in chaos. Aisha's heart raced as she stood, breathing heavily, watching as Lawal fought off the men who had been holding Mercy captive. The sound of fists meeting flesh, followed by the thuds of bodies hitting the floor, echoed in the otherwise silent, abandoned building. But despite the violent struggle unfolding in front of her, Aisha's focus remained on Mercy, who was now sitting on the floor, her hands shaking but free. One of Ken's men had tried to pull a gun, but Aisha had been quick. She had knocked it out of his hand before he could fire, leaving the man scrambling to recover, disoriented. Ken, who had been standing at the far end of the room, watched the scene unfold with increasing anger, his smirk fading into a scowl. "This isn't over, Lawal," Ken shouted, his voice full of venom. "You may have won this round, but there's more to come. You can't hide forever." Lawal, his shirt ripped and his face bruised from the scuffle, glared at Ken. "You're done, Ken," he spat. "You've made your move. Now it's my turn." Ken backed toward the door, his face twisted in frustration. "Don't get too comfortable. This isn't the end of the game. It's just the beginning." And with that, Ken turned and bolted out of the room, his footsteps fading into the distance. Aisha watched him go, her breath still coming in sharp gasps. She couldn't believe what had just happened. Her heart was still racing from the fear, the danger that had surrounded her, but the relief of having Mercy safe, at least for now, began to settle in. As the adrenaline slowly faded, Aisha rushed to Mercy's side. She knelt down beside her, her hands trembling as she checked for any injuries. Mercy looked up at her, her eyes tired but relieved. "Aisha," Mercy whispered, her voice shaky. "You came for me. I thought I was going to die in here." Aisha took Mercy's hand in hers, squeezing it tightly. "I would never leave you, Mercy. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner." "No, it's not your fault," Mercy said, her voice weak but filled with gratitude. "You came for me, Aisha. You saved me. That's all that matters. Lawal approached them then, his face grim but full of determination. We need to get out of here, he said, his voice low. Ken's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. And I have a feeling that we haven't seen the last of him or Micheal. Aisha looked at him, her brow furrowed. What exactly does Ken want from you, Lawal? He kept talking about taking something from you. What is it? Lawal paused, his gaze flickering between Aisha and Mercy. He took a deep breath before speaking. Ken isn't just after money. He's after control. He's been working with Micheal to undermine my business. They've been planning something for months, trying to get me to hand over control of my company to them. But I won't let them. Aisha felt a knot tighten in her stomach. They want your company? But why? Lawal ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear in his eyes. Because they know what I've built. They want to tear it all down and take it for themselves. If they get what they're after, they'll control everything. My wealth, my business, my entire empire. I can't let that happen. Mercy, who had been sitting quietly, looked up at Lawal with a worried expression. But they already know everything about you, don't they? Your business, your assets. They've been watching you. It's been too quiet for too long. Lawal's face hardened. I've made enemies in the business world, Mercy. Powerful ones. And they're willing to do anything to take me down. I didn't want to believe it, but I know now. Ken and Micheal are just pawns in a much bigger game. Aisha could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on them. This wasn't just about Mercy anymore. This was about Lawal's future, and it was clear that if they didn't act fast, everything Lawal had worked for would be in jeopardy. We need a plan, Aisha said, her voice firm. We need to find out what Ken and Micheal are planning, and we need to stop them before it's too late. Lawal nodded. I'll get my team on it. We'll track them down, find out everything we can. But right now, I need to get both of you out of here safely. Aisha glanced around the room, the fear she had felt just moments ago beginning to return. The danger wasn't over. In fact, it felt like they were just beginning to uncover the tip of the iceberg. Suddenly, a loud crash sounded from the hallway. Aisha's heart dropped into her stomach as the door burst open. Ken wasn't alone. Behind him were several armed men, and they were all headed straight for them. Get down! Lawal shouted, pushing Aisha and Mercy to the ground just as a bullet flew past them, lodging itself into the wall behind. Panic spread through Aisha's chest as she tried to steady her breathing. Lawal grabbed her arm, pulling her behind an old desk. Mercy, still weak but determined, crawled beside them. The room erupted in chaos as the sound of gunfire filled the air. Lawal! Aisha shouted, her voice shaking. We can't keep hiding. We need to do something. Lawal's eyes were filled with determination, but he knew they couldn't stay in the open forever. Stay down, he said, pulling out a gun from his jacket. I'll handle this. Aisha didn't argue. She knew Lawal wasn't just fighting for himself now. He was fighting for everything he had built. And she was fighting for Mercy. As Lawal carefully moved to the edge of the desk, readying himself for the fight of his life, Aisha and Mercy huddled together, both of them praying that they would make it out of there alive. The gunfire continued, growing louder, more frantic. Aisha could hear Ken's voice in the distance, taunting Lawal. You think you can stop us, Lawal? You're nothing. You'll never win. Lawal fired back, his voice cold. We'll see about that. Aisha's heart raced as she prepared for the worst, hoping that somehow, they would all make it out of this alive. The game was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The room was chaos. Gunfire echoed through the building as Lawal fired back at Ken's men. Each shot a warning that they wouldn't be easy prey. Aisha and Mercy huddled behind cover, their hearts pounding in their chests. The weight of the situation pressed down on them. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a battle for everything Lawal had worked for. Aisha's mind raced. They couldn't keep hiding. Ken was relentless, and Micheal wasn't far behind. If they didn't act fast, they'd be trapped. Lawal, we need to get out of here, Aisha shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of gunfire. Lawal's eyes flicked to her, a grim resolve on his face. He nodded, his grip tightening on his gun. "We're not staying here. We'll find another way out. Stick close." As Lawal moved, firing at the advancing men, Aisha helped Mercy up, her legs still shaky from the trauma. The two of them moved swiftly, staying low, following Lawal through the chaos. They reached the back of the building, where an old exit door stood slightly ajar. It was their chance to escape. But just as they were about to push through, the door swung open, revealing Ken standing there, a smug grin on his face. "You think you can escape that easily?" Ken sneered, his gun raised. Aisha's heart dropped. They were trapped. But before Ken could react, Lawal lunged forward, knocking the gun from his hand and tackling him to the ground. The two men struggled fiercely, but it was clear that Lawal wasn't going down without a fight. With a final, decisive move, Lawal disarmed Ken, his breath ragged. He stood over him, looking down with a mix of anger and disdain. "You've lost, Ken. It's over." Aisha and Mercy quickly rushed past, out the door and into the night air. They were alive, but the battle wasn't over. The game had shifted, and they were far from being safe. The cool night air hit Aisha like a wave as they burst through the back door of the building, emerging into the quiet streets of Lagos. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart, but the danger was far from over. Ken had been disarmed, but Micheal and his network were still out there, lurking in the shadows. Aisha glanced over at Lawal and Mercy. Mercy was still shaken, her body bruised, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. "We're not out of danger yet," Lawal said, his voice grim but determined. He was already thinking ahead, formulating their next move. "We need to disappear for a while. Ken and Micheal won't stop, but we can't let them win." Aisha nodded. She understood the gravity of the situation. There was no turning back. They had to protect themselves and their future. Suddenly, Aisha's phone rang. It was Tiga. "Aisha, it's not over," Tiga said urgently, his voice frantic. "I've tracked down Micheal. He's planning something big. You need to get somewhere safe, fast." Before Aisha could respond, the sound of distant sirens reached her ears. They had no time. "Come on," Lawal urged, grabbing her hand. "We need to move now." As they ran, the world around them seemed to blur. They didn't know where they were going, but they knew they had to keep moving. Michael's game wasn't over yet. They still had one final battle to face, and this time it was all or nothing. The night was eerily quiet as Aisha, Lawal, and Mercy made their way to an old safe house that Lawal's team had set up in case of emergencies. The streets were empty, the only sound being their hurried footsteps echoing through the alleyways. Aisha's heart was still racing, the adrenaline of the past few days lingering in her veins. They were on the run, but they weren't beaten yet. They were ready for what came next. Once inside the safe house, Lawal quickly locked the door behind them. The walls were bare, the place simple but secure. Mercy collapsed onto a chair, her body exhausted from everything she had been through, but her eyes were wide with concern. "What's next?" she asked, looking between Aisha and Lawal. "Ken and Micheal won't give up. We can't just hide forever." Lawal looked out the window, his face serious. "We're not running anymore. It's time to put an end to this. Ken and Micheal need to pay for what they've done, and I'm going to make sure they do." Aisha took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. It was hard to believe how quickly things had escalated. The man she loved had been targeted, and now they were in the fight of their lives. "I'm with you, Lawal," Aisha said, her voice steady. "We'll face them together, but we need a plan. We need to be smart about this." Lawal turned to her, a faint smile crossing his face. "You're right. I've been gathering information on Micheal. We have a chance to take him down once and for all, but we need to hit him where it hurts. His finances, his power." Aisha's mind raced. "What's the plan?" "We'll expose Michael's dealings," Lawal explained. "He's been laundering money through several of my competitors. If we can leak the evidence to the authorities and the media, he'll be finished. It's the only way to take him down." Aisha nodded. "And what about Ken?" Lawal's expression darkened. Ken's no longer a problem. Once we expose Micheal, he'll turn on him. He's nothing without him. The tension in the room was palpable. They were preparing for the final battle, the moment that would determine everything. Just as Aisha opened her mouth to speak, a loud knock came from the door. Her heart skipped a beat. "Who is it?" she called, her voice filled with dread. "It's Tiga," came the voice from the other side. "We need to talk." Aisha rushed to the door and opened it, finding Tiga standing there, his face grave. "What is it?" Lawal asked, his tone sharp. Tiga stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I've got news," he said, his voice low. "I tracked down Micheal. He's planning to flee the country tonight. He's been moving his assets, preparing for a getaway." Aisha's stomach dropped. This was their last chance. They couldn't let him get away. "We have to stop him," Aisha said, her voice filled with urgency. Lawal nodded. "We will. This ends tonight." They quickly gathered their things, preparing to leave. The time for hiding was over. They were going after Micheal. The streets of Lagos were dark, the city alive with the hum of life. But beneath it all, there was an underlying sense of tension. Micheal was slipping away, but they wouldn't let him go without a fight. By the time they arrived at Michael's hideout, it was almost dawn. Lawal's team had already secured the perimeter. They moved swiftly, silently, taking their positions outside the building. Aisha felt a knot in her stomach. This was it, the final confrontation. They entered the building, guns drawn, hearts pounding with anticipation. Every step was filled with the weight of everything they had been through. Micheal was inside. They could hear voices. As they rounded a corner, they spotted him. Micheal was talking to one of his men, unaware of their presence. He was preparing for his escape. Without warning, Lawal stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "It's over, Micheal." Micheal froze, his eyes narrowing. "You think you've won, Lawal?" he sneered. "You're too late." "I don't think," Lawal said, his voice firm. "I know." In a split second, Tiga and the team moved in, securing the area while Lawal and Aisha confronted Micheal. The evidence they had gathered was already in the hands of the authorities, and it was clear that Michael's empire was crumbling. The game was up. "Micheal," Aisha said, stepping forward. "You've hurt so many people. It's over." Micheal laughed bitterly. "You think this is over? This is just the beginning. You can't stop me. There are always more players in the game." Before he could say another word, the sound of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of the authorities. Michael's face turned pale, and the smug confidence he had worn throughout the ordeal disappeared. "You're finished," Lawal said, his voice colder than ever. Within moments, Micheal was taken into custody, his empire collapsing around him. Aisha stood there, her heart pounding, as she watched the police lead Micheal away in handcuffs. This was the end of the road for him. He had underestimated the power of love and loyalty, and now he was paying the price. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Aisha turned to Lawal, their eyes locking. "It's over," she said softly. Lawal nodded, his gaze filled with both exhaustion and relief. "It's over, but we're not done. We rebuild now. Together." They stood in the early morning light, side by side, ready to face whatever came next. They had survived the storm, and now they would build their future from the ground up. And this time, nothing would tear them apart.